Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Annalise Riles. I am Associate Provost for Global Affairs and Executive Director of the Northwestern Buffett Institute for Global Affairs. And our mission at the Buffett Institute is to foster meaningful engagement across borders of all kinds. And certainly that is what the Fulbright program does. So we're just thrilled to be sponsoring Northwestern's inaugural Fulbright Week this week in deep collaboration with the Office of Fellowships, the Office of the Vice President for International Relations, and also Northwestern's Office of Administration and Planning, without who all this would not be possible. So thank you very much to them. The goal of this week is really to elevate the profile of the Fulbright program on our campus, to just give people a sense of the remarkable opportunities that it affords for faculty, students, and staff, and also to just learn from and benefit from some of the wonderful experience of our Fulbrights and be in community together, those of us who've been part of this program. And really the amazing thing, one of the things we care a lot about Buffett is how universities can do more to foster peace. And that is really the mission of the Fulbright program, is to create peace across borders through the engagement of ordinary people, students, faculty, and staff. And so it's just great to be part of this. Now I should say, we are the sponsors of this event, but the brainchild, the person who had this idea initially, is sitting over here to my right. So Beth Pardo, who is our director of the Office of Fellowships, once said to me as we were walking back from a football game, there should be like an event where we celebrate Fulbright. There should be something. So thank you, Beth, for that. And I should also say that thanks to Beth's efforts and the efforts of so many others in this room, Northwestern has once again been named a top Fulbright producing institution. It's the 19th consecutive year. And so we're not starting from scratch here, folks. There's a lot of amazing support for this program. So I just want to thank Beth and everyone else. And on that, maybe Beth, could you just say a little bit about what you do in this space and just share a little bit? Would that be all right? Great.
So first I want to say this is the first time, and I wish my father were here to hear you say that it was coming back from a football game. I had a good idea. I always say he took me to every one when Northwestern had its longest losing streak. So that's a nice turn of events. Annalise already shared that I hope everyone on this campus knows that we are tremendously proud of our 19-year track record as a top producer of Fulbright student awardees. And we haven't just done this for every year that Fulbright has counted. That's 19 years and counting. We have already surpassed this year in our Fulbright awardees an all-time high in our English teaching assistantship. So we have won in these past 4 years of the pandemic. We have had 84 Fulbright student grantees, and we already have 26 in the coming year. And what I really want to focus on today, and it's why I'm so grateful to Annalise listening to my half-baked idea on Central Street and running with it, is because it really is. There is a Fulbright circle of life, right? It takes all the constituencies at the university. It is a campus-wide effort. So for those 110 student Fulbrighters, that's 330 letters of recommendation. And so this is what cannot be done. It takes dozens of FFAs, it takes dozens of campus review sessions, and that involves our faculty and our staff participating, many of whom are in this room, many more who are off throughout campus and around this campus and others still working with students in other capacities. So with that campus-wide accomplishment that takes all hands on deck, I was so thrilled that we have Professor Madison as our keynote speaker, because she started as an FFA Fulbright faculty advisor working in our office with what I call the dynamic duo of Fulbright over there, Dr. Steve Hill and Amy Kehoe, who deserve so much of the credit for raising the profile among students, getting up the application numbers, and working with the diversity of awards that a Fulbright can be. So with that, I'm going to use Dr. Madison as the role model of how this Fulbright Circle of Life works, right? So you have a Fulbright Scholar who goes overseas. That Fulbright Scholar then is able to come back to campus and serve as a resource for students who are applying to go overseas and need a letter of affiliation. That is the core relationship. And those students may then, in turn, Circle of Life, grow up to be Fulbright Scholars. I always tell folks, you can be a Fulbrighter with gray hair. You know, it is a program that keeps on giving. You may start as a student doing one program, continue as a mid-career professional, and that wisdom on campus from our staff who've participated, from our faculty who have participated, lifts up our student program. And so I am so grateful for all of you being here. I am so grateful to the offices that sponsored this event and made it possible. And I am delighted and excited about the potential to build upon what is already a fantastic network of communication and really, we'll go back to sports, blow it out of the park, hit a home run. Thank you.
That's great. Oh. Thanks so much, Beth. And, you know, just as you're thinking, and I should mention, we'll have a reception after today's keynote, so that'll be an opportunity for us to discuss informally and sort of connect with some of the amazing folks that have been mentioned as resources in this room. Just as you're thinking about, you know, this, think about how we can do more, how we can, and, you know, it's great that we're producing so well on the student side. Could we do more on the staff side? Could we do more on the faculty side? I just want to acknowledge here, we're so delighted. We have Timothy Brick, who is rector of the Kyiv School of Economics with us from Ukraine. Just so delighted that you're here as a Buffett faculty member. Just fantastic. Slava Ukraine. And, you know, think about, could we use Fulbright? Are there ways we can connect with, you know, to bring those partnerships to be? So, all right. So without further ado, we're going to get to our main event for today. And here I'd like to invite our own Andrea Ambico to come forth and introduce her. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalise. I am one of the very fortunate people that had Soyini as a mentor. She was my PhD advisor when I was a student here at Northwestern in performance studies. And ever since, she's been someone that I deeply admired and loved. So I was very excited when I was asked to introduce her. And I was also slightly anxious because I knew I couldn't possibly, in a few minutes, do justice to Soyini's very prolific career and the significance of her work for those of us who believe in the importance of doing global research from an interdisciplinary perspective. So this is my attempt at introducing Soyini. Soyini Madison is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Performance Studies at Northwestern. Her work focuses on the intersections of performance ethnography, environmental justice, and poetics within political economies of race and gender. She lived and worked in Ghana as a Senior Fulbright Scholar, conducting research for her book, Acts of Activism, Human Rights and Radical Performance. That book focuses on the work of local Ghanaian activists and how they employ performance as tactical interventions in their day-to-day struggles for women's rights, water democracy, and economic justice. She also adapted and directed her ethnographic experiences in Ghana in 2 stage productions. The first one, Is It a Human Being or a Girl? Is a performed ethnography on traditional religion, modernity, and gender poverty in West Africa. The second one, Water Rights, is a multimedia performance about the struggle for clean and accessible water. Through her writing, her teaching, and her stage performances, Soyini makes the world around her more just, truthful, and beautiful. If her work is already impressive by itself, it becomes all the more impressive when we stop to think about the influence she had on many scholars and students. Soyini's students have become teachers, activists, artists, and academics all around the world. She's mentored them through their research and fieldwork projects in a variety of global settings, such as Ghana, South Africa, Israel, Palestine, Libya, Tunisia, Vietnam, Colombia, Mexico. The list goes on and on. The many books and articles and performances and art installations that have emerged out of that fieldwork would have not been possible without her. Her book, Critical Ethnography, is the blueprint for navigating the politics of ethnography, and is a book that, if nothing else, is a book about doing fieldwork from the heart without compromising analytical rigor. Among those of us who have been her students, Soyini is known for her generous intellectual engagement, her unconditional support, and for keeping us accountable to do our best work, or as she would call it, to do the work that your soul needs. I can go on and on about how Soyini is a life-transforming teacher and a brilliant scholar, and just generally the wisest, most fierce human being you'll ever meet. But I'm going to give the floor to her, so please join me in welcoming Professor Soyini Madison.
Thank you. I am really happy, honestly and genuinely, to be here. This is an important talk to me because it is the work that, in Alice Walker's words, our soul must have. It's about peace. Oops. Okay. I want to begin by summarizing in 3 statements the many statements and the many reasons that are repeated over and over again as to why Fulbright is great, why everybody should be a part of the Fulbright program. I want to do that because all of those statements are absolutely true. And I want to just kind of combine them into 3 and respond to them in a way that might shed another light to it. One we always hear is the Fulbright program is the premier international exchange of ideas. That is so true. And that's hard. That is really hard to do. In this exchange of ideas, we don't come to another human in any part of the world where the power dynamics are neutral on either side. The power dynamics are met sometimes, this has been my experience, sometimes with resentment, sometimes with veneration, sometimes with the kind of inquietude that is where one is not quite sure. But we don't always come to these dialogues freely and easily. It's hard work. And as we work through these dialogues, once we get to talking, and I was a Fulbright scholar from 1998 to 1999. I stayed an extra year and stayed another half year. Okay? So working with a compelling dialogue or a contentious dialectic, one can also work with the process of contestation that is a mess and complicated. But that's so good, and it's so important because it means that it's not going to be superficial because we're talking about peace. And that is an investment, it's an intellectual investment, it's an investment of labor, of physical labor, and it's a labor of the heart. We end up, if we recognize that this is not just an easy exchange or maybe a difficult exchange, but one where you're absolutely committed to the work, you'll know that it is memorable and the effects are lasting. It's been 20 years. They still wear on my heart. I remember those dialogues like they were yesterday. And the ones I remember the most were the ones that were the most challenging, that moved everyone in that space. The second one that I've kind of combined from a lot of Fulbright fan talk is Fulbrighters become citizen ambassadors. That is absolutely true. I can attest to that we become ambassadors, and we know that's a good thing. But we also know, at least for me, I'm not always happy with my country. There are things that are happening that make me very sad. And when asked in situations that are delicate, you wonder, should I tell the truth? Should I say nothing? And that is a case-by-case, moment-by-moment practice. And it does take practice. But I will say that whether good, bad, or ugly, in terms of what happens in the US, that we will always be ambassadors, not by what we say or think about US foreign policy, but the work we do there. The work that we do there is ambassadorship in action. The third point I want to make in terms of what's always said about the Fulbright is that being in the Fulbright program is the return on the return on the investment is incalculable because you open diplomatic doors. That's true. But what I found in my work and being acquainted with works of many Fulbrighters in policymaking and governance and research and the academic realm is that you do not only open diplomatic doors, you create new doors to open. And some of these doors are broken and they need renovation. And they need those folks who have gone through the Fulbright applications to do the renovation work, because that's also quite challenging. And that Fulbright process, who gets in and who doesn't, bears the responsibility of bearing witness to the renovation of those doors. Okay, so that I just wanted to open with that because we hear a lot of these statements a lot, and I just kind of wanted to add my 2 cents to them. When I knew I was going to do this talk, because it's been so long since I was a Fulbrighter, I wanted to hear what some of the new Fulbrighters were saying about the program now. And it was really interesting because one of the first, and you might have heard this one of them said, it's what you make it. Another one said, it becomes a great adventure. And I put those together because if it's what you make it, and you really make it something, it does become a great adventure without fail. Another one said, you don't know what you are capable of until you are put in certain situations. I coupled another response with that one because I thought it was an answer to this first one about putting yourself in certain situations and you don't know what you're capable of. And this other young Fulbrighter said, I changed when I was immersed in the community. So my advice, this youngster said, was you should immerse yourself in community. Now, immersing yourself in community, I don't know how else you can be a Fulbrighter without immersing yourself in community. We understand there are levels and degrees to that. Your community may be your research lab. Your community may be in my case, the village out of which you stay. It may be your classroom. But being there for a length of time, there's an immersion that takes place because that's not your home. Okay. Because it's not your home and it's not your place of familiarity, there's a matter of ethics involved. There's a matter of hard work and communication involved, and that requires a level of immersion. I think most of us here have seen or heard Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story. It's just about everywhere. I think we all, most of us at least, are aware of that. And I just want to bring that up, and I am assuming that Adichie's stories is brought up a lot when talking about the Fulbright program, because that story actually in many ways embodies the mission of the Fulbright. But I want to bring it up because I think it also speaks to my opening remarks, and I hope it will also speak to the stories that I want to tell you and share with you that I hope will be useful to you as you venture off into your Fulbright work. And The danger of a single story, there are 2 points. I just want to review them, even if you know them. The 2 points she makes in this, I think, 30-minute talk that's amazing, is she talks about the danger of a single story as the moments when we only know a person through one particular lens. And she says her mother always wanted her to eat all her food, and it was important for her to eat her food. And because they come from a very middle-class background, her father was a university professor, her mother was an administrator. So they come from this middle-class background, and her mother says, look at our houseboy. He's very poor, very poor. You eat all of your food because he, and I'm paraphrasing this, because he doesn't have access to the food you have. Do not waste your food. And so that was the story of the houseboy. He invited her to his home, and he saw that the brother was making these beautiful, enormous, intricate, beautiful baskets. And she looked at them and understood that this takes technique. It takes skill. It takes a vision. And she thought, oh my, this story is not just about him being poor and having no food. Look at all of the capabilities and all of the beauty that's made in this home. The other story she tells is about going to college, and her roommate says to her, oh, you're from Africa. She's from Nigeria. Africa's big, right? She says, oh, you're from Africa. You can speak English. And then she says, did you bring, some tribal music with you? And so she said, well, I brought Mariah Carey with me. And so there's a quote she has here. The single story provides no possibility of equals, no possibility of complexity, no possibility of other ways of being. Show a people as one thing over and over again, and they become that thing. We know that these examples she casts as dangerous stories, but we know they are dangerous single stories. And we know that they can range from the torture chamber. We know that they can range from being stoned in public and other very, very cruel and bloodless moments throughout history. And in those moments, I would argue that to be dehumanized in that way rises out of a particular single story. And I bring those up. I know it's absolutely more complicated than that, but it can't be without that single story, and however that's cast. So I want to, and I also bring that up because I want to invite us, as we think about being Fulbrighters, is taking Adichie's notion of the single story just a little bit further, because there has to also be a kind of story of the single story. Like, how was this story made? How was a single story made into a single story? What is the story that brings up, or where the single story emerges? What is the history that sets forth the single story? I've lost my place in my notes, so just bear with me. So yes, that's what I want to invite you today to share with me. And the stories of the stories, the reports, the experiences in my Fulbright that ultimately became a book, the performances, there were stories that invoked those stories, and that's how that emerged. Those are the stories. that gave birth to these. And I want to do that today because I think the emergence of, or the backstage drama of how we make our reports and the experiences of being a Fulbright and engaging in all of the ways that our research will contribute in the hard work of peacemaking. I think that would be instructive as you think about what you can bring to this work, how it feels being in the field, what is everlasting, because you're not only going to produce a product of peace, you're going to live in those spaces. And some of that might not get to the report. Some of that might not get to the book. And those moments can be just as interesting. And those are some of the moments that I want to share with you. I was in the beginning stages of scripting oral histories I conducted with local activists on the public stage. And the public stage in Ghana was going to be held at the W.E.B. Du Bois Outdoor Theater. At the time, I also taught at the University of Ghana, and many of my students were in the performance. Meanwhile, a very large and vibrant university protest erupted on campus against raising school tuition and curriculum concerns. The protesters' aim was to close down the university and boycott classes until their demands were addressed. I knew many of them, and some were part of my research and the performance. I felt there was a mutual respect and admiration between us. On the other hand, I taught in the English department, and the department chair, who I respected a great deal and who I also worked with in my research, he sent a memo to all the teaching staff stating, we must hold our classes. There were not to be any canceled classes, and we would teach as normal. I was completely, utterly, and totally in the middle. The students might see it as a betrayal if I held class, as defying their protest, being against their just cause. Even more troublesome to me, they might question my integrity relative to human rights and social justice and my commitment to them in this endeavor. My colleagues and chair in the English department, however, might see it as a betrayal to their commitment and their process in actually trying to solve the issue of tuition hikes and curriculum advancement. Also, I was told it was against Fulbright policy to be politically involved in this way. Where did I stand? Oh my. I was sympathetic with the students and my colleagues. I identified with the students due to my own history of college protest in the 60s and being kicked out of university for being part of the group that took over the campus chapel. My personal history and alignment were with the students. But I also believe my colleagues were trying to make the changes the students were demanding, but there were larger forces they were contending with strategically. It would take time. I understand as students, sometimes you don't feel you have that time. I know I felt that in the 60s. The question, should I jeopardize the research, my future teaching, the public performance, and my Fulbright, and therefore cancel class? Or just risk it and cancel class out of loyalty and solidarity to the protesters. I remember my college days and calling out many of my professors as sellouts. To be thought of as a sellout really stung. I made the decision to teach class. I got ready, class notes prepared, and went off to teach. In the middle of the class, we heard the protesters enter the building. They made it up to the second floor and stormed into our classroom. I knew many of them, but they were surprised and disappointed that I held class. The protester covered the room and sat on top of the desk. My concern was for the students who attended class that day, but they were not afraid, and we were not afraid. The protesters looked at the board and saw that I had listed each of the points made by them, and in the next column, the reasons why each was justified and warranted dissent. I wasn't expecting them to come. This was the class plan for that day. The last point I want to make is why the students and why I didn't feel fear from them. And why this is something 20 plus years later, I will never forget this moment. Probably one of the most important teaching moments of my life, not only in the classroom, but in the ethics of greeting and meeting others. They stayed for about 15 or 20 minutes. They saw the board, and we talked about what was written. Honestly, there was contention, but it was honest contention. There was understanding, and it was honest understanding. And there were questions, and they were all deeply, deeply honest questions. We talked about what was written. We talked about the roots of the problem with tuition increases and where that might be coming from. They asked why I made the decision to hold class. Our upcoming public performance on human rights and activism, they asked what that was about. They asked about the complexity and nature of contradictions and how you work in and past the middle ground. Time to end class. We all left. They continued with their protest. And my students joined them. Many of them did. The final story is a bit different. It was my second year living in Ghana. I was leaving the main market one afternoon. It was extremely hot that day in Accra. I was exhausted. The trotros were passing by, packed, you know what trotros are, big, the buses were people. The trotros were passing by, packed with people. I felt insufferably homesick, especially for my son and daughter. The smells of the market that I always loved were now unpleasantly overwhelming. I felt like the ugly American. As I stood impatiently with my ugly face on, waiting for the next trotro, I noticed a woman washing her baby in a large bucket of water. Graceful and playful with the baby as the baby splashed suds all over the ground. They were both laughing. The woman laughed and hummed to the music coming from all directions in the marketplace. It was a scene indeed. I almost forgot about the trotro. I was captured by this. An old man, half dressed with matted hair, he was disoriented and covered with dirt. He approached the woman and the baby and attempted to take off his clothes and get into the bucket of soapy water. There were two young men waiting for the trotro stop with me. They walked over to the old man and with a willful tenderness, gently arranged his clothes to cover him. They held him up with a kind of respect, that sweet respect for the elderly. One on each side held his arms and guiding him down the other side of the marketplace. I thought about this and I'm still unpacking this. The sociality, poverty, and politics of dirt. The old man. We know Mary Douglas talks about this. That was a Mary Douglas moment. Action, the two men. Action as elegance in the deconstruction of disgust, replaced by kindness and respect, the young men. Security and being embraced when you are within the commons. Also, the protection. This woman was washing her baby, humming to the music. When the old man came up, she didn't miss a beat. She was not concerned about any of that because she was in the commons and she knew she was protected and she would be taken care of. This is a very true story. Enactments of love and beauty held in deep attention. That was me. And this is what I teach all my students, is from the Diana Reeves song. Whatever you do, be still, stand in love, and pay attention. And it doesn't matter how you feel at that moment, something will change. And I want to end, I think I have a few minutes. Okay. I want to end with a moment from the first performance we did. This was at the W.E.B. Du Bois Open Theater. It was, is it a human being or a girl, based on my research with gender. And it was my last few days in Ghana. We finished the class, finished teaching, finished all of the research, and this was our last performance. And this is how it feels when you're a Fulbrighter and it's time to go home. It's been 20 years and I always get choked up by this, you know? It is night in Ghana. What defines the night here are the stars and the breeze. The stars because they are like shining hieroglyphs against a vast black canvas, and the breeze because its gentle coolness is a respite from the brutal heat of the day. On this Ghanaian night, I stand far in the back of the outdoor theater at the home that once belonged to the expatriate W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm looking out over the audience as they sit and watch the performance. I'm watching the performance too, but as a director with that overwrought intensity and vulnerability that never seems to ease up with some of us. Our watching is always more than watching, it is obsession. We are beholden to every sight, sound, and moment within the frame. Our hearts jump at the possibility of some wayward slip up and natural breathing. It is suspended, natural breathing is suspended until the show is over and we can exhale finally in the greetings and the chatter, the congratulations, the small talk that comes after the end. This is because they were performing the oral histories and personal narratives of the women that were trokosi at that time and the human rights activists who were there to protect them and transform the traditional religion. That was at stake with this performance. Not all of my performances am I this crazy. Sometimes I go home, but with these I couldn't. So I stand here now knowing this is the final scene and the end is soon approaching. Knowing that this end means our last performance forever gone, disappeared. I stand here now knowing that my life in Ghana will soon end, and I will leave this performance, this theater, this country, and go back to the USA. And now suddenly, I feel the weight of too many endings. I will hang on to this moment like time has no force. I wish I could put this moment in a box, wrapped in forever and ever, then pull it out once in a while when I really need to live inside it again, exactly as it is right now. And when I'm back in the States, or next week, or when I'm 99. It is Sunday, June 25th, 2000, at 10:13 p.m., and I'm standing watching this audience of Ghanaians, watching my show, our show, and I'm going to pay attention to every detail of this moment, because there's no such thing as a box wrapped in forever and ever. There is only this memory. I will remember this moment in its complete, specific, detailed, and utter fullness most of all. Yes, most of all, I remember how it feels, the breeze and the stars and the smells of this night, the feel of the ground under my feet, the voices, the sound of drum. I will remember it in my skin. Thank you. Thank you.
My goodness. What a gift you've given us. Thank you so much. That's really, it's not often that we get to grasp the cosmic spirituality and material ethics of these very mundane things that we have an opportunity to live through. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you. All right, so from that, if that hasn't inspired you to want to be a Fulbright, I really don't know what else we can do. So beyond that, let me just say that if you are a student and you're interested in considering a Fulbright, we have some wonderful people here, as Beth mentioned, who work very, very hard. So I just ask Amy Kehoe and Stephen Hill, would you mind standing up so people can see you? First of all, thank you for what you do, and folks, please search them out. So Fulbright also offers opportunities for staff, and we have a number of folks in this room who have been Fulbrights as staff. There are a number of ways that you can engage with the program, but is Kim here, Kim Rapp? No? Okay. Kim Rapp in the Office of International Relations is organizing some activities for staff. You can also speak to my colleague Samantha Nisan today, who's over here. So Sam, please stand up. Thanks. Thanks. And then we're really eager to increase our faculty and researcher Fulbrights, both our Northwestern faculty going out into the world and all of us inviting Fulbrights from elsewhere to come to our campus. And so we're really fortunate that the Office of Administration and Planning, in particular, Anahit Gomtsian, could you stand up, please? Anahit has been working very hard to make this possible. She's done something remarkable, which is crack the nut so that this now counts as one of those fellowships that, so she's done a lot of the background administrative work to make this work very well. And if you speak to Amahit or Samantha here, they can orient you today to that process. And finally, I really want to thank my colleague, Samantha Nisan. Samantha has just poured her heart into this. She's the organizer of this entire week. She's the organizer of today's event. Samantha, thank you so much for what you do. And of course, there are a lot more folks in this room who have done this remarkable work, like Dr. Madison. I just want to thank you also. You know who you are. And I hope this has inspired you, and I hope that we can do much more. So for now, what we're going to do is transition to a reception, have a chance to chat, just try to talk to the person next to you. They're probably a Fulbright who's had another amazing experience like this, so they're worth chatting with. And just one more time, Dr. Madison, thank you so much. Thank you.